Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is June Heider. I'm the Director of Technology at a company, RealEyes Media, in Denver, Colorado. We're an application development shop and a strategic consultancy focusing on various areas of streaming media, whether it's cross-platform player development, media workflow, infrastructure. If you have a need, we will build it. So today, we're going to talk about AI and specifically the subsection machine learning and how you can leverage that to pull insights out of all that dark data that you have laying around. Just really quick show of hands. Was anybody in my Monday workshop? Good. Oh, one? So you're welcome to stay. It's going to be kind of the same slide content. So if there's something else on the schedule, I will not take offense if you go check something else out. But it's your call. And then second, how many of you have actually leveraged any of these AI kind of indexing services that are being offered? One, two. I know which one you've used. Which one have you used? I work for Microsoft today. Oh, okay. So you use Veritone then, right? No. All right. So let's start talking about some really fun and exciting things. Does this look familiar to any of you? So every organization these days, no matter if they're a media company or not, are finding themselves with more and more and more video, and it's just growing exponentially. And one analogy that I like to make is I have a tendency to take tons of pictures, tons of video all the time. Okay, so I'm right now a media company for my family. The problem is my wife always gives me grief because even though I took 770 photos on my Norway trip recently and some videos as well, I never really share the stuff. And there's a reason behind that because I'm too lazy to go through and catalog it, tag it, add all of this metadata around my home video library so that I can feel comfortable sharing it with people. So that's what's happening here. You're sitting on a wealth of video that you can use. You can clip it, send it up to social media channels. You can republish it to other applications where content aggregators or whatnot. So you have all this content that maybe only gets used once, maybe it never gets used. You should be able to find that content again later so that you can make the most value out of that content. So one problem with that, though, is we all have a limited staff that has 24 hours a day that they could theoretically work. Hopefully they're not working that much. And the staff could get burnt out if all they're ever doing is metadata tagging, creating transcripts, et cetera. There's more creative and more useful things that your humans could be doing. So that's where AI comes in, and specifically machine learning. So in the example of my home video library, it'd be really cool if my thousands of home videos, I could say, I want to find my son snowboarding on a bluebird day in Colorado. And it would go through my library, and using the metadata that had been generated would be able to weed out the stuff I'm not looking for to expose the stuff I am. Same example. I want to find videos of my daughter where she's not smiling. So getting to the point where you don't have to have all these manual metadata taggers that allows you to get to this point where you can have a natural language query to find the content within your library, that would be really cool. Does anybody have that yet? Oh, one person. And are you using any machine learning, or is it all manual? So humans or computers to tag your content? Okay. Can you tell me what vendor you're using? Okay. All right. So we'll move on. So I think we all get the gist there. So there are other areas where machine learning is being used. There's been this kind of explosion of video encoding shops that are doing this per title encoding, where they're leveraging machine learning algorithms and training their encoders to basically create high quality video that can be streamed at very low bandwidths. So that's one area. Another area is kind of the user analytics and potentially contextual advertising. So you have all this metadata around this video, somebody's watching it, then you can know, okay, this person's watching videos on cats, maybe I'm going to show an ad on cat food. And then finally, quality control. So there are some use cases where machine learning algorithms are being used in those areas. I think, for instance, Conviva has this thing where they have like kind of an IoT system where they have sensors all throughout their edges, and they report back, and they use machine learning at the central hub to figure things out, errors, things like that. I want to focus on indexing, metadata, and transcription. So you have so many choices, and they grow every single day. I learn about a new vendor pretty much every day, it seems. Google, Microsoft, AWS, those are big heavy hitters. They all have some kind of computer vision or speech-to-text solution or machine learning-based translation system. There's also Veloso is a Finnish company that does a really, really good job when it comes to AI and machine learning. Veritone has a very interesting platform where they allow you to build your own engines, and then you can leverage their engines as well, or their partners' engines. So for instance, if I say, I want to do some object detection to find my son snowboarding, you have a number of different engines you can choose from to do that object detection for you. And then Watson Media is a really interesting one. They have a very, very focused kind of sports use case. So they've been using machine learning when it comes to things like golf and tennis. And now recently I saw a demonstration where it was, I think, Fox, and I can't remember the sport. FIFA, so soccer. There's others as well. Clarify, they have a lot of really cool custom models. Hive AI, they have a platform that has some really compelling enterprise solutions, such as they create models for self-driving cars. Adobe Sensei, they used to just be focused on image AI, but now they're starting to do object tagging and recognition within videos. That is currently a private beta. But if you go to the Adobe Sensei page, you can sign up for it, and if you're lucky, you'll get into that beta. I have not yet, and it's been a couple weeks, but hopefully one day I'll get my invite. And then there's a couple others that people have told me about. Avid actually has media analytics. Micro Focus Idle is one of my partners mentioned this particular solution because it runs on-premise and not in the cloud. And then VoiceBase was an interesting one a partner mentioned to me where their customer was a call center. So they need to do all this speech to text, and they found that VoiceBase was actually a very good solution in that regard. The list goes on. So Gray Meta, they actually have an app that more of a consumer kind of end user facing app, not an enterprise app, that they're about to launch. So you can go sign up for early access. It's called Curio. And I know they do a lot with the government space and more the enterprise space. And then I was recently clued into vLinks, and they have kind of an interesting model too. And by default, you can go and create a demo account and have it just automatically choose clips within your video. So that's pretty cool. So I can't do all of this work on my own. I'm the director of technology, which means I wrangle cats and give them a direction. This is part of my team. Another guy on my team that wasn't there for the picture is sitting in the back, Phil Moss. He's a very solid developer that is kind of their lead. The guy on the left, Billy, he actually sat down with me and we kind of sent 3 to 4 standard videos like Tears of Steel to 4 different AI services and did a compare and contrast. And it was pretty interesting what we found. And then these two guys on the right, Grant and John, they helped build some of these demos that you're going to see later. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on indexing and transcription and all those insights that you can get out of that dark data that is your video. We're going to talk about those use cases. we're going to talk about how to get started. So how many of you have actually started using AI services now that more people are in the room? Couple? Not many? OK. So I'm going to give you a chance to figure out how to get your developers started. And if you don't have developers, some of these solutions actually have some very friendly interfaces that you can use as somebody who doesn't know how to code. So that's really cool. And then some other thoughts, and we'll go from there. So before we go into the use case, this is something that I hear over and over again, and it's very, very true. If you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. So each of these vendors has their strong point. And part of your job before you start using them is to figure out, what's my content profile? What kind of content do I actually have? Is it movies and television? Is it news footage? Maybe it's nature videos. You want to ask yourself that question. For instance, I mentioned Watson Media Team. They're doing soccer, they're doing tennis, they're doing golf. If you're a sports broadcaster and those are the kinds of sports that you have content for, they may be the solution to go with. So figure out what content profile you have. And then what is your use case? I gave that call center example earlier. They don't really care about object detection because their specific use case is about using machine learning to pull transcripts out of phone calls between their representatives and customers. So they're probably going to go with a different service than somebody who has a lot of really high-resolution nature footage that they want to index with things like gorilla and bird of paradise and stuff like that. The other thing to consider is how accurate do you actually need your results? And how fine-tuned do you want that? Because some of these vendors, they have pre-trained models that you don't really have the ability to go in and tweak. You just kind of have to use what they have. Others, they'll let you create a custom model. And we'll talk a little bit more about training near the end. And then a very, very important thing is, do you have developers? If you don't, there are solutions out there for you. If you do, there are solutions out there for you. And you want to pay attention to your developers. That Grant guy that was in the middle of the picture, he's used AWS for a long time. So that's his go-to when it comes to AI services. He can do Google, but his preference is AWS because that's what he knows. The other thing you want to consider as well is language, right? Is it JavaScript? Is it Java? Is it Go? What kind of languages do your developers have under their belt? So ask yourself those questions before you get started. And once you get started, here's some ideas on the things that you can do leveraging machine learning and these services that are out there right now. So visual detection, what do you see, computer? It's a gorilla. Awesome. Thank you. I didn't have to watch the video. So when it comes to visual detection, object detection is a really big one. What do you actually see in that video? And how confident are you that you saw that? So a lot of these slides here, on the left is JSON. So this is the data that comes back when you use these services. So from a developer perspective, they're going to say, hey, service, please tell me what's in this video. And then this data is going to come back with some very, very useful information. In regard to video intelligence, Google does a really good job. And a really cool thing that they do is they offer categories as well. So it's like, not only did I see a brain, but I also know that the brain is in the organ category. And I'm about 80% confident that that's a brain. And you can see that represented within that JSON to the left, if it's not too washed out. We have a category entity of organ. Above that, it says the entity was a brain. So you get the picture. Apparently, Google has 20,000 labels. So there's 20,000 objects that Google is capable of detecting. And that's a pretty good amount. The other thing is, in recent day, they've brought object tracking into beta. So not only could it detect the brain in this picture, but it could detect the brain if there was wheels on the table and it was kind of going across the screen. That's something pretty new. It's still in beta. AWS has thousands of labels, but they didn't specify the number. But one interesting thing is we threw a video up to AWS Recognition. That's the name of their service. And we got a label back that was red carpet premiere. So it was, I think, like a E with the exclamation point, and people were walking and they're taking pictures of them in their dresses and stuff. So that was kind of interesting because I didn't expect to see a label that was that specific. Clarify, as I mentioned earlier, they have a number of really interesting models. So Clarify, they have an apparel model, they have a food model, travel, weddings, in addition to their general model. And then apparently Hive AI can detect commercials. So the stream's playing, and then all of a sudden a commercial plays. Oh, I saw a commercial. Veloso does expressions in injury. So if my arm's bleeding, that's something that Veloso, the Finnish AI company, might be able to see. AWS, when it comes to the face, they really, really focus on the face. So if you're looking for faces, if you're trying to figure out, hey, I want to draw like one of those curly Q mustaches onto the video, this is a service you might want to use. Because not only do they detect the face, but they know where the eyes are, the nose is, the corners of the mouth are. And they also can do the roll, pitch, and yaw. So all of that is represented there on the left in that JSON there. And what you'll see there to the right, where it says face and it's a big red box, that's what's called a bounding box. And a bounding box is basically telling you the computer saw a face right there. That's actually something that a lot of these services haven't been providing, but are starting to provide. So I think Google recently started providing bounding box and some other services as well, because you might want to do something creative with that bounding box information. And then in addition to detecting faces, a lot of these services detect celebrities as well. So Microsoft Video Indexer, they have stated that they know about 1 million celebrities. And that's actors, world leaders, athletes, et cetera. And you'll see that here in a demonstration later. Video Indexer from Microsoft. You'll notice that I've highlighted the word blender.org. So there's brand detection. Microsoft actually detects brands from OCR, so optical character recognition, text on the screen. They can also detect it from audio as well. But if you're looking for that service that, oh, I see the golden arches, that's McDonald's, you're going to want to look into a company like Veloso, Hive AI, Clarify, or Veritone. Video Indexer does OCR, as you saw in the previous example. So in this case, it found Nathan Vigdal inside the text and returned that back so that we didn't have to watch the credits, because we don't watch the credits, right? Sometimes. Other vendors that do OCR are Veritone and AWS. And as of November 2018, Cloud Video Intelligence from Google started doing OCR in beta. So those are some of the visual use cases. There's others, but those are kind of the primary ones that you keep hearing about. There's also audio use cases as well. So what are these machine learning algorithms doing for us in the world of audio? The first one, I want speech to text. I don't want to have to sit here and transcribe it manually because it takes too long and I have so many typos when I'm typing. So where can I leverage machine learning to do transcription for me? Video Indexer, that's what you're seeing here in this JSON response. They do transcription, and they support up to 10 STT languages, the last I checked. What that means is certain services, when you send a video up and you want that speech to text, they can only do English. Microsoft does 10 languages. So that's pretty sweet. And they also output SRT files, VTT files, and TTML as well. So if you need to pull those transcripts, you may want to take a look at Indexer and grab those files, and then you're off to the races. AWS does transcription speech to text as well. They're a little bit newer. So I remember them coming out of private beta around NAB time, so like April-ish of this year. But what we've seen in our findings is that even though they're newer, they have a pretty high accuracy from the videos that we've thrown up there. And then IBM Watson Media says they can do 95% accuracy under the right conditions. So the example I gave on Monday is a helicopter landing right outside this door. It would be very, very loud. Luckily, I'm mic'd, so these services could probably pick out what I'm saying. But if you guys were talking, yeah, good luck. So we need to consider the condition under which somebody's talking to get that accuracy. Just like we need to figure out like the visual quality. If it's really dark, this computer vision might have troubles finding objects within the screen. So once you have a transcript, oftentimes you're going to want to take that transcript and translate it to other languages. Right now, Google is king. Microsoft's doing pretty good too, but Google is king. 100+ languages. So if you want to do that translation, that's probably the player that you're going to want to go with. However, as of October 29th, AWS Translate does 113 language pairs. So they're probably in that same boat as Microsoft, who does about 54, the last I checked. So yeah, taking that transcript, having machine learning algorithms translate it for you. Audio sentiment. So this is a pretty interesting one. So this is something that both Microsoft and IBM do. They'll like take that audio and say, hey, was that positive? Was it sad? Was it joyful? I like this example because on the top it's dishes, and it's a score of 0.1, which means it's pretty neutral. Yeah, because it's dishes. But then below it, it says you love her, and it's like 0.69, which is pretty positive. I would hope so, because it's about love. So that's sentiment. And that's something that the Google and Video Indexer and Watson do. Veloso, the Finnish AI company, they do not just speech. They also do like, I hear footsteps. I hear birds or a cat meowing. I hear a particular instrument playing. That's something that not many of these vendors do. Microsoft also does non-speech audio like kind of insights as well, but they take kind of a different approach. For them, their audio insights are, what is the speaker talk to listen ratio? I know that my ratio is a lot of talk today. And speaker longest monologue, well, for me, it's what, 45 minutes to an hour? And then speaker word count. And they also do a band word count. The other cool thing with Microsoft is when you pull in that transcript, it'll actually show you like who the speakers were. So speaker 1, speaker 2. So that's pretty neat. So there's other things you can do as well. Shot change detection, black frames, and then my favorite one, live streaming. So shot change detection is when the computer vision sees, oh, it just went from a golf course to a forest. Or it went from Gorillas in the Mist to Arnold Schwarzenegger in whatever that Mars movie is. So it's being able to take that video and break it up. And one interesting thing is Netflix keeps talking about this like per shot encoding, where they actually take each shot and they give it like the best encoding parameters. So leveraging one of these services and a shot change detection, if you have developers, you could say, hey, let's take each one of these shots and let's throw them up to our encode workflow and have it do per shot encoding. Some other companies that do shot change detection are AWS, Veloso, and Video Indexer. The other good thing about shot change detection is I mentioned golfers. So I read this really cool example where creating highlight clips, we're going to look for that shot where the golfers are actually on the course playing their game versus when the camera pans as the ball's going with the forest in the background. because that's not going to be a very interesting highlight clip, just this ball that you can barely see and a bunch of trees. So that's another use case for shot change detection. Black frame detection. So obviously, sometimes you're going to have an intentional black frame within your content. You might be doing kind of a transition from one scene to the next. But it's good to know that some of these services can actually detect when there is a black frame. Video Indexer is what you're seeing right here, where it says, hey, from this time to this time, there was a black frame. Big Buck Bunny actually has a bunch of black frames in it. I'd never even noticed it. And then Veloso also does black frame detection as well. Live stream analysis. Live stream analysis is pretty sweet. This image you see here is Veloso at NAB. I went to their booth, and they had this live stream playing, and during the playback, it was putting bounding boxes around logos. It was giving me an indication of what time of day it thought it was, and just telling me some other things about the objects that it saw in the video. Not all of these services do live yet. I heard there's a panel earlier, and there's a Microsoft guy in there. He mentioned something. He alluded to live next year sometime, but there's no details. I'm sure we'll find out soon. But who's doing it right now? Veloso is doing it right now. AWS actually has a really, really compelling use case when it comes to live as well. They do Kinesis video streams. And what they allow you to do is you stream your video in, and at certain points, they like send the frames down. They can do facial detection right out of the box. At NAB, they had this like camera sitting on top of a TV at their booth. And as people were walking by, they had this application that was showing how much traffic was walking in front of that camera throughout the course of the conference. That was pretty sweet. And it was using facial detection to figure that out. And that's one that you can use. You can use that SDK to not just do facial detection, but have it do other things, such as object detection or speech to text. Hive, they have live as well. They have an enterprise solution called Media, so Hive Media. So if you're an enterprise and you want to do some of that live processing, you may want to check Hive out. And then Veritone, they can do live as well. And they actually have a really cool blog post on AWS's kind of developer area where they're talking about how they leverage some things like Kinesis video streams and Fargate to like do some live detection. I'm going to show you a real quick video. Because one of the things that you can also consider is there's been machine learning algorithms and computer vision services for images for a good chunk of time. Longer than video, at least from what I've seen. Video is a group of pictures. So in the case of a live stream or even a VOD, if you have a specific service that you think is going to be really good, just pull the keyframes out and send it to an image service. So this demo here that I'm going to show you, and David, do you know what time this ends? Sorry. Half past? OK. Let's pick it up here. Oh, 30 minutes, sweet. OK. So I have this demonstration of something that we're kind of playing with back at the office. And this is an Android application.
So here's a brief demonstration of the Google Vision API. For what we've done, we've made it pretty simple. Take objects and be able to put a simple border around them and tell us the confidence level. So as you can see, we're passing off these inputs to the Google Vision API. It's just a simple snapshot of the screen that we're looking at, and you're seeing this in real time as it detects. That's why it's jumping around all crazy. So if I focus in on the keyboard here, you can see that it detects it with a pretty high confidence rating, and it attempts to put a boundary around it. If I can stop moving it, it can detect multiple objects, as you guys can see, when it wants to behave, that is. But yeah, pretty simple little demonstration.
So that's pretty cool. One thing I want to point out is, why would you think that it thinks those computer monitors are mirrors? So to me, they kind of look like a mirror. And this goes back to machine learning. It's only as good as the input that comes in. It may not understand that a computer monitor can have a really, really glossy front and be off. But that looks like a mirror. So that's kind of interesting. It did pretty well at detecting the keyboard. It did pretty well at detecting the mouse. And it was real time. All he was doing was like moving his phone around. And we were taking snapshots and sending them up to the cloud vision and getting data back. So don't just only consider these video services. You could look into some of these image ones as well. All right. Actually, go back to mirroring or non-mirroring. Any questions right now? Is my pace okay? Yeah, what's the question?
In your OCR example, it showed just sort of the name, but not the, the role of the person, director, the user, or whatever. It seems like the association of those two would be much more valuable than just the name by itself. So would you have to add some extra logic around that?
Most likely. Yeah, and a lot of these, it's like I detect something, but they kind of leave it up to you to like decide how to use that insight.
And then sort of follow up, how does it handle scrolling text, like credits at the end?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, that was sort of more of a static slate type thing. Would you get this stream of lots and lots of tags as the text scrolled, or would it sort of compress that down to a shorter number of attributes coming back?
Yeah, so I mean, the text is scrolling during the duration of the video. It's a piece of VOD content. I sent it up to Indexer. So that person's name was detected as the text was scrolling up. So it's going to return all the words that it can see.
But that's one instance of the name, not each position as it scrolls.
Yeah, and one thing that these services will do, and I think I understand what you're getting at, is if it was like June Heider. It saw June Heider, but then later on it saw June Heider again. They put a time code in there. So that way you can count the number of instances. So let's talk about how to get started. And how many of you have access to developers? About half of you? Okay. Well, the good news is if you don't, go sign up for a video indexer trial. You can do everything without having to be a developer. They have a really, I would say that this is the industry-leading UI to compare against, would be Video Indexer. You sign up for an account. If you use the Indexer trial as a non-developer, you'll get about 10 hours to play with. If you use it as a developer, you'll get 40 hours to play with, probably because it costs less for them for you to hit APIs rather than using this GUI. But it's a really robust GUI. You have a player on the left. You have some like download buttons on the left as well to like pull transcripts down and things like that. And then you get your insights on the right. So first off, it says, hey, I detected a bunch of faces. The nice thing is I can actually click on the pencil that's in the top right, and I can say, actually, this is June Heider. It's not, but I type that in, and then it trains that for me. And it trains it for me because you don't want to mess everybody else up if you like put the wrong name on somebody. But going forward, you can have that wrong name in your own content library. Labels, and then sentiments. So sentiment is like, how was the audio and kind of context? Was it very positive? Was it neutral? Labels, it found some black frames in here. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do in Indexer. And then that second panel here is kind of the transcript, but then it also throws keyframes in there and OCR. And there's kind of like a layers button next to the pencil in the top right. You can click on that and you can say, I don't want to look at the OCR stuff right now. I just want to look at the transcript. The other really cool thing about the indexer is you can actually say, hey, notice this is in Swedish, if you're familiar with Swedish. This was an English transcript. And when I went into the UI, I hit a drop down and I said Swedish. And it made a call back to their service, their translation service, and returned a Swedish transcript back. The really cool thing about their transcript is that it's got a bouncing ball. So you can turn auto scroll on, and it'll like highlight each line as it's playing back. So good stuff. You can make highlights too, highlight reel. Watson, I only got one screenshot of theirs. I've seen some demonstrations of Watson Media as a solution. I've taken some screenshots. I've seen screenshots. They have a really robust product as well. But getting a trial, you talk to their reps, and they set you up a sandbox if you're contemplating buying their service. But yeah, they do some really cool stuff. Veritone, here's an example of Veritone. So Veritone's the operating system for AI. And one thing you'll notice is over here on the right, and I think I have a laser pointer, huh? Let's try this. Right there. That's object detection A. If you hit the drop down, you'll see all these other object detection engines that you can use. So they have, like, for every kind of indexing you can do, they have, like, multiple engines that you can play around with. And they also, like, highlight at each time code within the video, they highlight what they saw at that particular point in time. You can sign up with Veritone, and they'll give you $300 of engine processing time for their developer access. Here's another example here. This is basically a list of all the different facial detections here on the left that they can do. And then over on the right, they have adapters. So like you can like pull content in from Dropbox or Google Drive. And what you're seeing here is the Veritone CMS. So for those of you that are not developers, you can sign up for a developer account, but then just play with these user interface tools. This is Veloso Report, so that Finnish company. It's kind of similar to like Video Indexer. It gives you some insights. You can actually set confidence threshold with Veloso, which is pretty interesting. So that's right here. I could say I only want to see things that you're about 90% confident about. And you can scroll across the timeline. This on-screen concepts area here, that will update as the video is playing. So like what it's seeing at that second of the video, it will continue to update. And then here's another kind of view. They're really big into compliance detection. So if you have like, a lot of user-generated content that you're ingesting, and you want to make sure that they meet certain standards, Veloso might be a service that you want to look into so that they can detect when videos are violent or they have racy content that you don't want your kids to see, et cetera. So they do a lot with compliance. This UI here, we're going to be making this available to play around with soon. There'll be a link to fill out a little quick form after this session's over. If you want access, I suggest you fill that form out. So we built this in-house. The reason is AWS and Google, even though they give you the ability to test their APIs in a graphical way, it's on their web page, and it's like a limited size video. As soon as you navigate away, it's gone. So what this allows you to do is allows you to hit their APIs and get the results back, and then load them in with a link to the video. And you can do like a thing very similar to like Indexer. It's a Mo Video AI Viewer. So that's for Google and AWS. So for the developers in the audience, this is the typical flow. You say, hey, please index my video. Sometimes you'll pass your authorization, like an API key over to say I'm allowed to use your service. Sometimes you'll want to get a token through like OAuth. You do all that stuff, and the video gets uploaded, and once it does, it starts indexing that video. That takes a little bit of time. For instance, Veloso says that if it's a 10-minute video, it's probably going to take about 5 minutes for them to index it. That doesn't include like upload time. So during that time, you have the ability to poll. So like once every 10, 30 seconds, you say, hey, are you done? Are you done? Until it is. Or they may actually allow like a webhook, what's called a callback to your system. So at the end, they'll say, hey, I'm finished. Here's your data. So in some form or fashion, you're going to request that data, and it'll pass it back to you in JSON format. So those little chunks of text that you were seeing on the left-hand side, that's what it looks like when you get that data back. And then enjoy. Have fun with it. For developers, it's very, very important to have documentation because oftentimes the source code's closed and you don't have access to just glean through it. Microsoft does a very good job with their documentation. My AWS developer likes the AWS documentation. I personally like the video indexer documentation because, one, I feel it's well structured, and two, if I'm logged into their documentation portal, I have the ability to try their endpoints right inside the documentation. And I think that's really cool. They also allow you to export Swagger files, and what a Swagger file is it's a JSON-ish definition, and maybe it's YAML, I can't remember exactly, but it's a definition of their endpoints and what kind of requests and what kind of responses you'll get back. And then you can import that into a tool such as Postman. SDKs are important, so software development kits. They allow you to they accelerate your development in the way that you don't have to build everything from the ground up. And they're tuned to the specific service. So AWS and Google, they both have a bunch of SDKs for different languages. So like an example is AWS, they have an SDK for Android, iOS, Java, .NET, Node.js, PHP, Go, and C++. That's a partial list. Google has a pretty big list too. Microsoft, they have a .NET SDK. And then Veritone, which is the AI operating system, they have a monorepo that's a JavaScript SDK that you can use to work with their services. One thing I will tell you is if you know JSON, you don't actually have to use an SDK. You can just look at their documentation, and you can just write the code, make the calls, parse the data when it comes back, and you're good to go. It's just the SDKs can be very handy and save you a little bit of time. How many of you know JSON? All right, about half. We created Postman Collections. We're in the process of kind of cleaning them up, sanitizing them, and stuff like that. If you fill out the form at the end, because you're interested in getting access to these, we're going to be able to share them with you in the coming future, very soon. But what this is I mentioned Swagger. So I could take the Swagger file from Video Indexer, import it into Postman, and make calls based on that Swagger file. It just like automatically generates the kind of blueprint skeleton for me to fill it out with data. So I put my API key in, and I make the call. I tell it where the video is. And I don't even need to build an application to actually play with these services. I can just do it right in Postman. So it's really, really nice. The other thing, too, is with Postman, if you go to click on the collection and say, look at this on the web, they have code examples. So I can go in and I can say, hey, I'm a Node developer, or I'm a PHP developer, or I just do curl requests at the command line. You can just hit this drop down, and when you change it, you get these code samples here on the right, and you get your documentation on the left. So Postman's a really, really cool tool, especially because it has a collection runner that allows you to say, to index a video and get the results back from Microsoft, I need to make these 3 endpoint calls in succession, do some polling, and then at the end of that collection runner, I'll get that JSON back. So it's pretty cool. It's a time saver, and you don't have to invest the time to build the application just to play around with these services. So yeah, we'll be sharing those. Training. Training is a very important thing. And I see a lot of people are leveraging these services kind of out of the box right now. The models are kind of closed. So Microsoft, they let you train some things, such as face and correcting the transcript and things like that within your own account. AWS and Google, good luck. AWS does let you upload your own faces. But if you were to want to add new labels, that's kind of a closed door. And the way I think about it is if I was malicious and I wanted to say hot dog or not hot dog and just have completely random images that weren't that, I could screw it up for everybody else, because you're sharing all this kind of training. So lots of these vendors will allow you to create upload training data, but it's kind of in a sandbox. Some of them do let you turn things on for like anonymous training data. For instance, one of the services I think allows you to do anonymous training data for audio transcripts. But for the most part, there's not that many training options right now with some of these services, but I feel that going forward, that may change. Because I had this example from somebody I was talking to at a previous conference where he had a team create this big, like, robust taxonomy for all the content in their media library. Spent a lot of time doing it so that things could be found, categorized well, et cetera. Then he had AI tag all this content, and now he had all this metadata around all the content. Problem was, his users that were trying to find the content were searching for things completely outside of the labels from AI and the taxonomy that his team had created. That's not cool. So in his case, what he could have done is he could have created a custom model based on search analytics. So what are the terms that people are using to find that content within my media library? So then I can then create a custom model that has classifiers that match the things that people actually search with. So if you want to go down that path, Clarify, they allow you to create custom models. And so does Veloso, Hive, and Adobe Sensei, when it actually comes out, they say that they're going to allow you to do custom models. I feel that going forward, the more we use these services, the more we're probably going to be creating our own custom models that are specific to our content library. What else? So that demonstration app I showed you earlier, combine your AIs. They all have their strong suits. They're all really, really good at specific things. Like, for instance, AWS, they do the face really well. So why don't you pick and choose what you want to use? You don't have to just use one, especially if you have developers on your team. You pull the JSON files, you figure out what data you're actually using, and you normalize that into a standard format on your system and shove it in your database so that you can find your content. Our video AI viewer, that's what the screenshot's from, is geared towards being able to index both from AWS and Google and combine those things together and then show you the results. Some other thoughts. So as we were kind of going through looking at all these labels from these various services, we came up with some interesting thoughts. We found out that Google really excelled at human and animal anatomy. So it could say, hey, that's an elbow on an arm, or it's a beak on a bird. So that was interesting. Interesting things that you'll find out as you start getting your feet wet and playing. AWS apparently is very good with plant genus and cloud formations. My favorite part is the machine learning algorithm that detected a cumulus cloud taught my developer what a cumulus cloud is. That's pretty cool. So the machines are teaching the humans. Veloso does really good with actions, so smiling, laughing, etc. And then Microsoft. They can also detect actions, and there are different actions there. But Microsoft was especially good at fighting scenes. So that was interesting. Because some of the other services, when we ran the content through, when there was fighting, they said video game. But Microsoft's like, nah, that's fighting. That's not a video game. So my recommendation to you is utilize these trial accounts and pick the content profile that is a subset of the type of content that you have. If you're a news organization, get a bunch of content that's like people on a news team talking about things. If you're a nature company, get that nature video library and create these models. But before you do that, just play with these services. Play with the video indexer. Play with Veloso. Play with Veritone, et cetera. And I definitely, AI isn't here to replace us. It's here to help us. So it's going to be humans and AI. It's not just AI, and it's not just humans. Really good example is like, with model training. I submitted this black and white cartoon to one of the services. I can't remember which one, and maybe I'm saying that because I don't want to get one in trouble. But it was a black and white cartoon from like 1930. And this guy is like hopping across like this with this black cape. What do you think it detected? Not a guy in a black cape. It detected a bat. And it's like, okay, I can see why that's a bat. I can see. It's like a 5-year-old that it's never quite seen something, so it's using what it understands through its own trained model to make its best guess. And that's where that confidence level comes in. And I don't think it was very confident that it was a bat, but I thought it was funny that it thought it was a bat, because I could see how it could have thought it was a bat. Just like the mirror example earlier with the computer monitors. So AI and humans, if you want to go down this kind of unified path of leveraging both, Clarify has a really interesting model where you can just do machine object detection, or you can combine it with their team of manual taggers, or you can combine it with your own team. So it's like best of both worlds. You're getting some basic stuff in, and then you're also leveraging human metadata taggers to kind of help out. Hive has 2 different services. One's called Predict, which is machine learning, and the other one is humans. It's Hive data. And make sure to put those checks and balances in. Maybe, it's good enough for you to say, hey, I'm going to use Video Indexer, and any of the labels that come back, I want to make sure it's 90% confident. And then you just kind of go through some of those initial, indexed videos and just make sure it's helping you out in the way you need it to. Just do it. Get out there. Get it done. I want you all to play around with these services because I want them to stay, because we're all businesses. If nobody's using these services, they'll probably go by the wayside. Get out there and index, create models, share findings with other people so that we can allow our computers to become maybe 6 or 7-year-olds instead of 5-year-olds. And I have a couple of minutes. That's the end of my slide deck, but what I wanted to do is kind of show you some of these other things. For instance, so I didn't need to do mirroring. I mentioned earlier that we took some videos, some standard videos that are well known in our industry, and sent them up to a number of services. And so what that ended up being is a couple of spreadsheets here where you can see Microsoft's on the left, Veloso's in the middle, Google's next to it, and then AWS is all the way on the right. And my buddy Billy went through and manually verified these labels, and we found some interesting things. When I talk about normalization, one thing that you're going to want to think about is if you do combine services, they may call things differently. So you got to factor that in as a developer. But Microsoft has labels like person, indoor, outdoor, et cetera. You could see where labels match between services. So both Microsoft and Veloso found a wall. And then you can also see where some service didn't see the same thing that the other services saw. This is kind of interesting. Google says individual sports, where Veloso and Microsoft saw sports, just sports by itself. So I'm more than happy to share these with you. I'll put the link up. But there was some pretty interesting findings, especially when you scroll down near the end, you start to see that, oh, wow, Google's doing a bunch of labels that nobody else has. Or if you scroll down even further, you can see that AWS has a bunch of labels like home decor that nobody else has. So it was kind of an interesting experiment there. The other thing is we're going to do this while I continue talking. We built this little demo encoder, and I'm going to just upload this very, very tiny video. Oops. I'm not going to try and play it. I'm going to upload it. And we're going to let it do its thing while we continue on. This is the tool that I mentioned earlier. So you have the ability to come in here, and you give it a video URL, and then once you do, I'm just going to fake that right now. You could take those output files you got back from one of the services and upload those together. And when you're done doing that, you end up with this view here. So the video is playing. You can hear the audio.
4, 3.
We can navigate through the transcript.
Talking last night.
Passion.
Progress.
You're a jerk, Tom.
And then the other thing you can do
Sorry.
is we have a confidence slider in here. So as I slide it away from 100 down to 0, bam, look at how many labels are in there. So we got some that are like 55% confident. We got some 60s. And as I slide it further and further towards 100, it's not that many labels. So it's 98% that at 9 seconds, there's a human. I don't actually see a human there. That's weird. My seeking might be off. Let me pull some more labels in. Let's go for factory. All right, it's an oil refinery, but I could see why it thought it was a factory. But yeah, so it lets you play around because, parsing through JSON as a human, take forever. So it's really cool to be able to see this stuff with your own eyes. And then here's Video Indexer right here. I'm going to go through and look at this guy. It's like an old clip I made of a Star Trek video. But it noticed John Hoyt was in here, and I validated that through a Google search because I didn't know who John Hoyt was, but that's John Hoyt. The weird thing is it couldn't tell that it was Spock. It was Leonard Nimoy, probably because of the pointy ears. But that's something that you could come in here and you can actually say, you know what, I know that this is Leonard Nimoy, and I think you go into Edit View, which I can't find right now. It's probably over to the side. But you have the ability to go into Edit View where you can then start tagging things and cause it to learn. As it's playing, we can see the timeline. I can turn auto scroll on. I can play. This one, I'm going to go to a different video that has more than that, like Tears of Steel. It detected a number of people in Tears of Steel. And you can actually see where it's seeing the OCR as it kind of goes down. Oh, weird. It's just playing multiple things.
Why don't you just admit that you're freaked
Sorry
out
about
by
that.
my robot hand?
I'm not freaked out by it's. All right, fine. I'm
pause this
freaked
real
out.
quick.
I'm having.
We got Veloso over here. So Veloso, it's showing all the jobs that I've sent up, but I can click on getting down the JSON or SRT file. I can go into the reports tool, which is similar to kind of that video indexer UI. So I can see the overview. I can see a heat map. I have the ability to train people. So I can say, hey, this is actually Leonard Nimoy, et cetera. Compliance detection. This is the really, really cool thing about Veloso, though, which I haven't really seen elsewhere.
If we start buzzing about that,
As it's playing,
we're liable to find
it's
their
actually
mental
telling
power
you
so
what
great,
colors it
they
detected
could reach out
in
and
the
swat
certain
this
seconds
ship
of the
as
video.
overflying.
It's Captain Pike they've got. He needs help. And he probably needs it fast.
Here's Veritone. So as you go through, you can see where it's updating the tags. That's pretty cool. And then if we go back to our media library within the CMS, you can see, pointer, you can see down here where this one I ran through 3 different services. So I ran it through object detection, facial recognition, and speech to text. So Veritone's cool. And then Clarify, I just started recently playing with. They're more of an image-based AI, but they do some video stuff. And I mentioned that you can break a video up into images if you want. But as it's playing, we can see general. As I scroll through, I can see mountain, no people, landscape, etc. So it's really cool stuff. So yeah, get out there, get playing. There's a really exciting field. Let's pause this, and let's throw up the link for you. And I thank you all for joining me today. Go ahead and fill out the survey, and I'll send you some goodies. And if you want, you can ask some questions. No questions? Are we all tired? Thank you all very. Oh, one question. No, go ahead. Let's go ahead.
Have you worked on any of this of bringing the metadata back into a CMS or a MAM, AM?
Yeah, we actually we work with Adobe right now. So this is Adobe Experience Manager. So we have a connector that we built for Adobe people that allows us. Okay, this is loading the widgets. That's the other cool thing about Video Indexer is they expose their widgets so that you can embed them into your own application. But where we actually kind of took that a step further is in the metadata schema, we are injecting these AI tags into the schema. So yeah, we've done that. And this is a really good example right here is utilizing it for AEM's DAM. Yeah, so most of them charge based on minutes. So like how many minutes of video you're processing. Veloso is strictly minutes, but some of these other vendors, not only do you have to pay for the minutes, but like for instance, Google Video Intelligence, you got to upload to Google Storage. So then you got to pay for storage costs as well, or possibly transfer. But generally, these specific services are like minutes. And sometimes some of these vendors will do, like Clarify does operations. So how many actual operations you try to make per month. And cost-wise, like a minute's cost is like anywhere from 7 cents per minute up to like 20, 30 cents per minute from generally what I've seen. Any other questions? Yep.
What are the main use cases for this
What are the main use cases? So allowing you to embellish the metadata within your media asset management. Also, there's a company in Sweden that's using the automated metadata to do contextual advertising. So that's another use case. Transcription, so to meet compliance. Or even user-generated content. So you're kind of like a YouTube or something, and you want to make sure that there's no violent videos being uploaded to your platform. So there's a number of different use cases for what I've shown today.
My other question is about the privacy. So my content is not for public consumption. Don't feel comfortable with external sources for escrowing or extracting the data.
Yeah. So privacy, it's probably going to depend vendor to vendor. Like for instance, Micro Focus Idle will actually run on-premise. And then Veloso, in the viewer that I showed you, they actually will allow you to market public. So by default, it's private. Obviously, it's going to transfer over the wire, so you got to keep that in mind. But yeah, it's going to vary vendor to vendor. I think question over there. Thank you.
Given these services also have recognition of what's on still image, have you looked at the economics of just sending keyframes yourself versus sending the whole video to the service and how that would trade off?
Okay, and I keep forgetting to reiterate the questions for Jose. So the question is, hey, have we compared the economics of utilizing image computer vision versus these video ones, correct? That's a good thing for us to put on our to-do list. No, we haven't. We had really started by being very, very focused with these video services as they started coming out, as demand from our customers and our leads had said, hey, we want to do this. But that's a very good point. I thank you for bringing it up. Any other questions? Good questions. All right, well, that said, I think I'm a little over. There's coffee in the expo room. All right. So go get some coffee, go enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you all very, very much for attending.